The morning sky over Chicago carried a pale, metallic light that made the city's tallest towers gleam like cold mirrors. The tallest of them all, Goldstein Innovations' 50-story headquarters, rose above the streets like a giant made of glass and steel. Its surface caught every beam of the sun and threw it back on the people below. Dazzling, untouchable, unkind. For most passers-by, it was a landmark of American ambition, a place where fortunes were made. For Emma Johnson, standing small at the curb with her baby brother tucked against her chest, the tower looked like a tombstone. She had never felt so tiny, so uncertain, and yet she walked forward as if the building had been waiting for her. Emma was only 8 years old, but her arms cradled Liam with a care that made her seem older. His tiny face peeked out from beneath a faded blue blanket, his eyelids fluttering in restless sleep. At just 3 weeks old, he should have been at home in a warm crib, surrounded by the gentle hum of his mother's lullabies. Instead, he was in Emma's embrace, being carried into a world of glass walls and sharp suits. She looked down at him and whispered, "It'll be okay, Liam. I'll find milk. I'll make it okay." The words trembled out of her, too big for her small voice. Her mother, Catherine, had tried to be strong that morning, rushing to a third job interview in clothes that were pressed but worn thin. But Emma had seen her cry for the first time. She had seen the eviction notice taped to their apartment door. She had seen the empty shelf where baby formula had been. She couldn't bear to hear Liam's soft, hungry cries again, so she had made the decision herself, go to the one place she knew still had food for babies, the company that once employed her mother. The revolving doors of Goldstein Innovations spun faster than her heartbeat. She pressed her way through, holding Liam close, as though the glass could break him. Inside, the lobby stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral, polished marble floors. Golden light from chandeliers, a silence that belonged to powerful men and women. Behind the desk sat Mr. Peterson, the security guard who used to give Emma peppermint candies when her mom brought her by for visits. He barely glanced up at first, distracted by the endless stream of people carrying boxes and folders. The fallout of layoffs still heavy in the air. Emma stretched onto her tiptoes, just enough for her chin to peek over the counter. "Catherine Johnson," she said in her small but steady voice. She used to work in financial analytics on floor 32. She forgot her family photo. At the mention of her mother's name, Mr. Peterson's stern face softened. His eyes fell to Liam, his small body shifting with a whimper of hunger. And for a moment the hardened lines of the guard's face cracked. "Your mom already here?" "Sweetheart," Emma nodded, the light caught in her throat, but she said it anyway. "She's upstairs." Mr. Peterson studied her for a long breath, then sighed and handed her a visitor badge. "Go on up. Then, but don't wander off." Emma pressed the badge to her chest like it was a medal and headed toward the elevators. The mirrored doors reflected her image back at her, an 8-year-old girl clutching the baby as though she were both mother and child at the same time. The elevator ride carried her higher and higher, each glowing number on the panel a reminder that she was stepping into a place her mother used to be proud of, a place they had lost. When the door slid open on the third or second floor, the sight that met her made her heart skip. The floor was in chaos. Phones rang without answers. Employees rushed with boxes in their arms, their voices tight with panic. Papers littered the hallways, and through the glass walls of the largest conference room, Emma saw a scene that froze her where she stood. Several men in tailored suits sat around a table, their faces red with anger. At the head stood Richard Goldstein, the man whose face Emma had seen on magazine covers in the checkout line. His silver hair was disheveled, his fists slammed down on the table. His voice thundered through the glass, each word sharp enough to cut. $500 million gone. $500 million. How does that disappear without anyone noticing? The walls seemed to tremble with his fury. Emma instinctively hugged Liam tighter, rocking him gently as he stirred and whimpered. She had come for milk, not for the storm of grown-up voices and impossible numbers. But her path had already brought her here, into the middle of a storm that would change everything. Liam began to cry, soft but insistent, the sound carrying across the floor. Emma's stomach twisted with fear, but she lifted her chin. She whispered again, mostly to herself but also to him, "Don't worry, Liam. I'll fix it. Somehow, I'll fix it." And in the conference room, Richard Goldstein's furious voice rose once more, a prelude to the moment their worlds would collide. The conference room door swung open so violently it banged against the glass wall. Startling Emma where she stood, Richard Goldstein stormed out, his eyes wild with exhaustion and rage, his tie pulled loose, his silver hair sticking out in sharp angles. He was not the man in the magazine photographs with a charming smile and polished confidence. He looked older, heavier with the weight of betrayal and failure. For a moment, he nearly collided with Emma, his voice caught like a growl. What? That he froze, his furious stride halting at the sight of an 8-year-old clutching a baby. Liam whimpered against Emma's chest, his tiny fist clenching, his cries rising like an alarm that echoed through the tense floor. Everyone stopped. The office noise fell silent, all eyes shifting from the furious CEO to the girl with the hungry baby. Emma lifted her chin, even as her heart hammered. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice small but unshaken. "Do you know where my mom's desk is?" "Catherine Johnson. She used to work here." At her mother's name, Richard's expression flickered. It was faint, gone in a second, but it was there, recognition. Then his features hardened again. "Your mother doesn't work here anymore," he said curtly. His voice wasn't cruel, but it carried the sharp edge of someone who had no patience left. Emma swallowed. Her arms trembled from the weight of Liam and the weight of what she had to say. "I know," but she forgot something, and she faltered, then gathered the courage only desperation could give. "And my brother needs milk. We don't have any." The silence deepened. Employees gathered nearby, their exhaustion mingling with curiosity. Jennifer Hayes, her sharp suit rumpled from sleepless nights, stepped closer, her gaze softening when she saw Liam. Richard, however, did not soften. His jaw clenched as he stared down at Emma. "You came all the way here for milk?" he asked, his tone hovering between disbelief and irritation. Emma nodded, her voice trembling but clear. "And for something else, I could help you." The words hung in the air, absurd against the backdrop of billion-dollar chaos. A child in scuffed sneakers, claiming she could help a corporation teetering on collapse. Richard let out a short, bitter laugh that cut through the silence like glass shattering. "Help me," he repeated, shaking his head. "Little girl, I've got Ivy League analysts, Wall Street veterans, and a board full of so-called geniuses, and none of them can fix this. And you think you can?" His laughter echoed across the floor, filling the space with disbelief, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was the laugh of a man cornered, a man who had lost faith in every solution. The employees watching didn't laugh with him. Their eyes, hollow from fear of losing jobs, turned instead toward Emma, who did not flinch. Emma held Liam tighter, rocking him as his cries grew louder, desperate, raw, her cheeks flushed. But her voice came out steady. "Yes," she said, "I can fix it. But first, my brother needs milk." The simplicity of her demand sliced through the absurdity. This wasn't about money for Emmy, it was about survival. The clash of worlds, her hunger against that crisis, made every person on that floor hold their breath. Jennifer broke the silence. "Richard, we have nothing left to lose," she said quietly, her tone a plea wrapped in exhaustion. For the first time, Richard's mocking smile faltered. He looked at the baby, his cries relentless, and something human stirred in him, something buried under years of boardrooms, profit margins, and the blind pursuit of empire. He raked a hand through his hair, muttering under his breath, then snapped, "Fine, get the kid some formula. There's got to be something in the lounge." Jennifer hurried away, and Emma's small shoulders straightened. She looked up at the CEO, her gaze unafraid. "Show me your numbers," she said. The employees shifted, whispering. Richard stared at her, this little girl with a baby on her hip and fire in her eyes. For a long moment, it seemed he would dismiss her again, but then he turned back toward the glass-walled conference room where chaos still reigned. "Gentlemen," he called grimly, "meet our new consultant." Emma stepped forward, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The child who had come seeking milk was about to step into the storm of corporate collapse. And though Richard Goldstein laughed, somewhere deep down, he knew something had just shifted. Because this wasn't just a girl, this was the beginning of a reckoning. The conference room swallowed Emma like a cavern of glass and steel. She had to climb into one of the leather chairs just to see over the edge of the massive table. The baby carrier with Liam beside her, his tiny fists flailing as if he could feel the storm around them. The room smelled faintly of cologne, coffee gone cold, and something else, fear. Papers were scattered across the table, screens flashed with cascading red figures, and men in suits muttered like generals who had already lost their war. "Richard," Goldstein leaned against the head of the table, arms crossed, his eyes burning with fatigue and doubt. "Gentlemen," he said flatly, "meet Miss Emma Johnson. She says she can fix what none of us could." His tone dripped with sarcasm, but the weight in the room was too heavy for laughter. The executives stared, their skepticism filling the silence. One of them, Marcus Thompson, the CFO with iron gray hair and a permanent frown, cleared his throat. "This is madness, Richard. We are 48 hours from bankruptcy, and you bring in a child. 48 hours?" Emma cut in. Her voice was soft but clear, rising above Liam's soft whimper. "Then you don't have time to argue. Show me the numbers." The interruption hung in the air like a slap. Marcus blinked. The other men exchanged glances, and slowly, reluctantly, he slid a stack of reports across the table. Emma pulled them toward her with both hands, her small fingers leaving smudges on the glossy paper. She studied the columns of figures with the kind of intensity that would have seemed absurd if not for the quiet stillness of the room. The grown men leaned in, curious despite themselves. She traced the numbers with her finger, whispering under her breath as though they were words in a language only she understood. "Here," she murmured, circling a figure with a borrowed pen. "You counted this expense twice, once when it left the main account and again when it entered the subsidiary. But you never tracked where it went after." She looked up, her eyes bright with certainty. "That's why your money is disappearing." Marcus leaned over, squinting at the circled figures. His lips parted. "That's impossible," he whispered, but the blood drained from his face as he typed furiously into his laptop. The screen confirmed it. "She's right," he muttered, almost to himself. "We've been double counting." A ripple of disbelief spread around the table. One of the younger executives rubbed his eyes. Another cursed under his breath. Richard pushed off the table, his skepticism faltering. He studied Emma with something unreadable shame, maybe, or the first glimmer of respect. "Go on," he said hoarsely. Emma nodded, her pigtails bobbing as she bent over the reports again. She flipped page after page, circling figures, drawing arrows, connecting what no one else had seen. "These arrows are wrong," she said, pointing to the whiteboard. "Money isn't flowing out. It's being funneled, like water pushed uphill. That can't happen unless someone's pumping it there." The room fell into a stunned silence. Jennifer returned just then, a bottle of formula in hand. She placed it gently in Emma's lap. "For Liam," she whispered. Emma's shoulders sagged with relief as she slipped the bottle into her brother's mouth. He laughed greedily, his cries fading into soft gulps. Emma held the bottle with one hand, her other hand steady as she circled another figure on the report. A baby fed, $1 billion fraud uncovered, two crises unraveling side by side. "Who's Victor Morgan?" she asked suddenly. The question hit the room like a gunshot. The executive stiffened. Richard's eyes darkened. "How do you know that name?" His voice was low, dangerous. Emma pointed to a spreadsheet heading, VM Holdings. "It's everywhere. In your reports, every department sends money there, but I don't see where it goes after. According to this," she tapped the page with her small finger, "he's gotten more than 300 million in 6 months. Marcus spun his laptop round to double check. His face went ashen. "She's right." Richard staggered back a step, his hand gripping the edge of the table. "That's not possible," he muttered. "Victor Morgan is our competitor." He could. Emma interrupted, her voice calm, almost matter of fact. "Because you weren't looking. Mom always says people only see what they expect. You weren't expecting a thief." The words hit Richard like a blade. His empire, the one he'd built from scratch, was bleeding out in front of him, not from market forces or bad strategy, but from betrayal. And the one to expose it wasn't a board member, not an Ivy League consultant. It was a girl who still wore sneakers with cartoon characters on them. Emma rocked Liam gently as he drank, her gaze locked on the CEO. "Your problem isn't the markets. It's inside your company. Someone is helping Victor Morgan. Someone close enough to use the digital signatures. That's why the transfers all look the same." Richard's fist clenched. His empire wasn't just collapsing from negligence. It was sabotage. And now, the silence in the room felt different, not skepticism, but fear, because if Emma was right, then the real danger wasn't outside. It was sitting among them. The conference room had gone still after Emma's quiet words. The silence so sharp, it seemed to press on the glass walls. Even Liam's steady sucking on the bottle felt loud, a reminder of why Emma had come in the first place. Richard Goldstein stood rigid at the head of the table, his knuckles white against the polished wood, his breath coming in shallow bursts. He had ruled this company like a general for 30 years, but in this moment he looked like a man stripped of his armor. Then, the door opened. The air shifted as Eleanor Goldstein swept in, her heels clicking against the floor like gunfire in the tense quiet. She looked every bit the queen of the Empire's sleek designer dress, diamonds that sparkled beneath the overhead lights, a perfume that trailed power and disdain. Where Richard's face showed wear and sleepless nights, Eleanor's was perfectly composed, a mask carved in ice. "Richard," she said smoothly, ignoring the mess of papers, the pale faces, the child perched in a chair. "You didn't answer your phone. The club is waiting for us." Her words were careless, but the timing could not have been worse. Emma's head snapped up from the reports, her gaze locking on the woman's polished figure. Something about the way Eleanor held her purse too tightly, the way her eyes flicked to the screens before darting back, set Emma's instincts aflame. Richard didn't move. His voice, when it came, was sharp as broken glass. "Eleanor, this is not the time." Eleanor's gaze finally landed on Emma, her lips curling with distaste. "And what on earth is this? A daycare now?" Her eyes slid to Liam, and for the briefest moment, Emma thought she saw something flicker in them, something colder than disdain. "She's the one who found the money trail," Marcus said grimly. Breaking the silence, she traced it to VM Holdings. At that, Eleanor's hand twitched on her purse. It was small, almost imperceptible, but Emma's eyes were sharp. She tightened her hold on Liam, who had just finished his bottle and drifted back into fragile sleep. "Victor Morgan?" Eleanor's laugh was brittle, the sound of porcelain cracking. "That's absurd. He's your competitor." "Richard. Why would he?" "Because someone helped him," Emma said suddenly. Every head turned toward her. Emma's feet barely touched the ground from the chair, but her eyes burned with certainty. Someone with access to the digital signature database. Someone who was in it at 2:17 a.m. On April 3rd, the room froze. Richard's eyes narrowed, confusion and suspicion colliding in his face. "What did you just say?" Emma slid the tablet across the table, her small finger pointing to the system log she had uncovered. "Here, Eleanor Goldstein's credentials. Access the database when the first forged signatures appeared." The silence that followed was suffocating. Eleanor's composure cracked for just a second, her pupils flaring, her jaw tightening, but then she laughed again, louder this time. "This is outrageous. Richard, you're taking the word of a child. Do you realize how ridiculous this is?" But no one laughed. Not this time. Richard's face drained of color. For a long, shattering moment, he looked at the woman he had called his wife for 30 years, the partner he had built an empire with, and in that stillness, the truth cut deeper than any numbers on a page. Betrayal didn't come from the markets. It had walked beside him every morning, shared his home, whispered reassurances in his bed. "Eleanor," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "Tell me she's wrong." Eleanor's mask slipped, just for an instant, and what peeked through wasn't innocence, it was contempt. "You were always too sentimental, Richard, too soft. You thought this company made you powerful, but it only made you blind." Victor understood that. The door burst open again. Two men in dark suits strode in, their presence filling the room like a thunderclap. "FBI," the taller one announced, flashing his badge. "Agent Davis, we have a warrant." Perfect timing. Eleanor's laugh crumbled into silence. Her carefully manicured hands clenched into fists. "This is ridiculous. I won't stand for." "You'll stand," Agent Davis interrupted coldly. "You're under investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement." The agents moved swiftly, one on each side, their hands firm on her arms. Eleanor's diamond bracelet clinked against the table as she tried to pull away. Her eyes darted across the room, landing finally on Emma. For a moment, the mask fell completely, and what stared back was raw hatred, sharp enough to make Emma's stomach twist. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Eleanor hissed. "You've ruined everything." Emma didn't flinch. She hugged Liam closer and whispered, "Mom always says numbers don't lie, even when people do." The words sliced through the room, and for once, Richard Goldstein had no laughter left. He watched his wife being led away in handcuffs, 30 years of marriage unraveling in a single moment. His empire had nearly crumbled because of the woman standing at his side. And yet, it was saved by an 8-year-old girl who came asking only for milk. The employees standing beyond the glass walls stared in stunned silence. The story of Goldstein Innovations had shifted. It was no longer about the betrayal of a CEO's wife or the schemes of Victor Morgan. It was about the child who had just exposed them all. And as Eleanor disappeared through the door with federal agents at her side, Emma knew the danger wasn't over. The real enemy was still out there, and now he would know her name. The next morning, the air in downtown Chicago felt different, not lighter, not freer, but charged. News vans were parked outside Goldstein Innovations, cameras perched like vultures on lampposts, reporters swarming the sidewalks. Word had spread. Overnight, the mighty empire of Richard Goldstein was crumbling, and the FBI had stormed his headquarters. Stock tickers ran the story in bold red lines, and whispers of insider betrayal filled the financial district. But inside the tower, the tension was heavier still, because the battle wasn't over. On the top floor, the boardroom had been transformed into a battlefield of perception. 12 board members sat in a long oval, their faces set with suspicion, anger, and exhaustion. Some had been with Richard for decades. Others were investors who had sunk billions into the company. Each one carried the same question in their eyes. Is this empire still worth saving? Or do we abandon ship? Emma stood just outside the heavy doors with her mother, Catherine, and baby Liam resting in his carrier at Catherine's feet. Her small hand clutched the visitor's badge again, but this time it felt different. Yesterday, she was a desperate girl seeking milk. Today, she was being asked to walk into a room full of billionaires and prove that she had saved their world. Catherine knelt in front of her, straightening Emma's collar, her own face drawn tight with worry. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "You're a child. They can fight their own battles." Emma shook her head firmly. "I want to help, Mom. They don't see the patterns, but I do. And if I can see them, I can explain them." The doors opened, and Richard Goldstein himself beckoned them in. He looked older than ever. His eyes ringed with sleepless nights, his confidence tempered by humiliation. Yet as Emma walked past him, he rested his hand lightly on her shoulder. "Don't let them scare you," he murmured. "Half of them don't know how their own computers work." The boardroom was vast, glass walls framing the city skyline like a silent audience. Emma climbed into a chair that swallowed her whole, her feet dangling above the polished floor. Catherine sat beside her, posture straight, though her protective gaze never left her daughter. Liam gurgled softly in his sleep, his small presence absurdly tender in a room thick with financial blood. An older man at the far end of the table, Walter Pierce, cleared his throat. His voice was gravel, filled with impatience. "Richard, I hope this isn't some kind of farce. We are gathered here to discuss the possible collapse of Goldstein Innovations. You preyed in a child. This child," Richard said sharply, "uncovered the $500 million embezzlement that none of us saw. She found what our analysts, our accountants, and even our auditors missed. Without her, we'd already be finished." Walter's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me an 8-year-old, 8. At 3/4, Emma interrupted softly. The room chuckled, but her eyes were steady. "I'll be 9 in October." A ripple of murmurs ran through the board, some amused, others annoyed. Then Diane Forrester, a silver-haired woman with a sharp gaze, leaned forward. "Tell us, Emma," she said. "How did you find what we all missed?" Emma slid off her chair and walked to the massive touchscreen display at the front of the room. Her small hand brushed the surface, bringing up charts and numbers that filled the glass wall. For a moment, she hesitated, her voice caught in her throat. Then she thought of Liam's cries the day before, of her mother's tears that morning, and her courage surged back. "Numbers are like connect the dots," she began. "They're supposed to make a picture, but yesterday, the picture was wrong. The dots didn't connect right. That's how I knew someone changed them." The room fell quiet. She moved her finger across the screen, tracing arrows between accounts. "See here? These transfers all happen on the 15th of each month, 3 hours after normal vendor payments. That's not normal. And these companies, Metacron, Torn Richmond, Coventry, look random. But if you rearrange the letters, they spell Victor Morgan." Gasps rippled around the table. One man adjusted his glasses, staring at the names as if seeing them for the first time. Emma turned back to face them, her eyes bright with certainty. "Victor Morgan stole your money because you weren't looking in the right place. My mom says people only see what they expect. You expected normal, so you didn't see the trick." For a long, weighty silence, the only sound was the faint hum of the city outside. Even Walter, who had scoffed the loudest, leaned forward now, studying the girl as if she were some kind of puzzle. Herself, finally, Diane Forrester broke the silence. With a laugh not mocking, but startled admiration. "Well, gentlemen, it seems the smallest voice in the room has the clearest vision." But not everyone was convinced. Halfway down the table sat Robert Caldwell, silent until now. His eyes were fixed on Emma, not with awe or amusement, but with something colder, calculation. He tapped a finger against his tablet, his expression unreadable, as though already measuring how to use this child's gift for his own ends. Emma noticed. She felt the way his gaze lingered, not like admiration, but like a chess player considering his next move. Richard rose, reclaiming the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will recover from this. We have identified the fraud, stopped the hemorrhage, and involved the FBI. But the most important lesson is this: we need new eyes, new ways of seeing, and we found them in the most unlikely place." He gestured toward Emma, and her applause did not break out, but the silence shifted. Suspicion gave way to grudging respect, skepticism tempered by astonishment. Emma returned to her seat, climbing back up into the chair as though nothing had happened. But Catherine saw the flush on her daughter's cheeks, the way she squeezed her fist in her lap. Emma had just faced down billionaires and won, yet even in that triumph, she whispered to herself, "Why did Mr. Caldwell look at me that way?" And deep in her gut, Emma knew the patterns weren't finished. The numbers had spoken, but people left darker trails. Someone in this room wasn't just an observer. Someone was still playing the game. Night had fallen over Chicago, and the city lights flickered like restless stars reflected in the glass of Goldstein Innovations. Emma sat at a small desk in her mother's new office. Liam asleep in his crib beside her. She had drawn a flowchart on the company-issued tablet, connecting dots the way she always did, seeing pictures in the chaos. But tonight, the picture wasn't just numbers, it was people, patterns of betrayal, faces that didn't fit, and one face in particular, Robert Caldwell. She remembered the way his eyes lingered on her in the boardroom, sharp and heavy, like a scalpel pressed against glass. Not curiosity, not even suspicion, calculation. He had watched her not as a little girl who saved the company, but as something to be measured, studied, perhaps used. The thought made her stomach twist. The door opened, and Samantha Reed, there, assigned security detail, stepped inside. Tall, alert, her presence was steady as a wall. "Your mom is finishing her meeting downstairs," she said. "I'll be here until she comes back." Emma nodded but didn't look up. She was still tracing names with her finger. Meridian Ventures, Caldwell's company. James Blackwood, their CEO. She had Googled him on Richard's computer earlier. His history connected back to Victor Morgan. 15 years ago. A partnership, dissolved quietly, buried in archives. To Emma, it wasn't coincidence. It was another line in the picture. "Liam's safe, right?" Emma asked suddenly. Samantha smiled faintly. "Safer than anyone in this city. He has more protection than the mayor." Emma nodded again, but her eyes didn't leave the screen. Safe isn't the same as invisible. Before Samantha could respond, the office phone rang. Its shrill tone cut through the quiet like a knife. Samantha crossed the room into strides and picked it up. She listened, her face shifting, eyes narrowing. Then she hung up. "That was Richard," she said carefully. "The FBI transport carrying Victor Morgan was ambushed outside Detroit. 2 agents injured. Morgan's gone." Emma's chest tightened. She looked down at Liam, sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling as if the world wasn't breaking around him. "He'll come here," she whispered. "He'll come back for what I found." Samantha crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. "That's why I'm here, and that's why we're moving you and your family tonight. A secure apartment. No one gets in or out without my say." The words should have comforted her, but Emma couldn't shake the sense that the danger wasn't outside the building, it was inside. She had traced too many lines, followed too many patterns. Every path led back to one truth. Victor Morgan wasn't working alone. Hours later, they were ushered into a black SUV. Through a service elevator, Catherine holding Liam's carrier tight. Against her chest, Emma with her backpack and tablet clutched to her. The security officers drove them through the underground garage, headlights slicing the dark. It should have felt safe, but Emma's eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, expecting shadows where there were none. At the secure residence, A suite of apartments buried in the upper floors of Goldstein's tower. They were met by Jennifer Hayes with a warm smile and a box of donuts. "Just to make it feel a little normal," she said. Emma tried to smile back. She even chose one with sprinkles. But her hands trembled as she bit into it. Something felt wrong. Something unfinished. She returned to her tablet, sketching connections again. And then she froze. Her project file was gone. Deleted. She stared at the blank screen, her pulse hammering. "My work," she whispered. "It's not here." Catherine frowned, leaning over. "Maybe you pressed the wrong button." But Emma shook her head violently. "No, someone took it. I had proof about Caldwell and Meridian. Now it's gone." Before Catherine could answer, the apartment phone rang. It was an old-fashioned landline. Stark against the modern glass, Samantha snatched it up, her voice sharp. "Who is this?" She listened, then her face turned rigid. "Put him through." She handed the phone to Catherine, her eyes hard as stone. "It's Caldwell." Catherine pressed the receiver to her ear. "What do you want?" A pause. Then Robert Caldwell's voice, smooth, calm to calm. "I have your daughter's tablet." Emma's stomach dropped. Catherine's voice sharpened to steel. "That belongs to my daughter. Give it back." "Of course," Caldwell said. "But I'd like to discuss what she discovered. It's dangerous information for all of you. Meet me in the boardroom, now." The line went dead. The room erupted. In detention, Samantha barked orders, security officers checking weapons, scanning feeds. Catherine clutched Liam to her chest. Emma sat frozen, her mind racing. "They'll try to stop us," Emma said suddenly. "Who will?" Catherine asked. Emma looked up, her eyes dark with certainty no child should carry. "The same people who helped Morgan. They're already inside." The service elevator clanged open behind them, armed guards ready to escort them to the boardroom. Emma picked up her backpack and slipped the last sprinkled donut inside. Her mother gave her a strange look, but Emma just whispered to herself, "Sometimes the smallest things matter most." Numbers, patterns, even donuts. As they stepped into the corridor, Emma's heart pounded. She had walked into this building once, as a child begging for milk. Now she walked again into the lion's mouth, not just with her brother's life on her back, but with the weight of a war no one else could see. And for the first time, Richard Goldstein wasn't laughing anymore. The boardroom felt different that night, darker than Emma remembered. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the Chicago skyline, glittering like shards of broken glass. The long polished table gleamed under the recessed lights, but there was something sinister in its emptiness. 12 chairs, but only one man seated at the far end. Robert Caldwell. He sat with perfect composure, Emma's missing tablet resting in front of him like bait. His suit was pressed, his tie impeccable, and his expression unreadable. But his eyes, that was what made Emma's heart pound. They didn't look at her as a child. They looked at her like she was a key. Catherine held Liam's carrier close as she entered, her free hand gripping Emma's shoulder tightly. Samantha and the security officers fanned out instantly, hands near their weapons. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, but they were already here. "Mrs. Johnson," Caldwell said smoothly, his voice carrying like oil across the glass table. "Miss Emma, thank you for coming. You stole from my daughter." Catherine snapped, "Return the tablet, and we'll leave." Caldwell smiled faintly. "Stole? No. Safeguarded. That tablet contained information you shouldn't have uncovered. Information that could make you and especially her targets far more dangerous than Victor Morgan." Emma stepped forward before her mother could respond. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "You already knew about him, didn't you? That's why you joined the board. You weren't here to protect the company. You were here to watch it burn." The corner of Caldwell's mouth twitched. "Clever girl. Not entirely wrong. I was placed here embedded, you might say, as part of a task. Force monitoring Morgan's activities. His fraud was just one branch of a much larger tree. You ripped the bark off in a single night. That was unexpected. So your government?" Samantha asked sharply. "Not exactly." Caldwell's gaze flicked to her without fear. "Private. Contractor. We serve governments when they're slow to act. My job was to map Morgan's network. Unfortunately, Emma's brilliance forced him to run before the rest of the tree could be cut down. You wanted him free," Emma said, her voice steady, "so you could catch more of them." "Yes." His eyes glinted with admiration and something darker. "And now he's gone to ground, warned by Eleanor, scrambling his assets. We'll still find him, of course. But you, Emma, you've changed the game." Catherine's arms tightened around Liam. She's 8 years old. She's not part of your games. Caldwell leaned forward. She already is. Every major intelligence agency in the world will have heard of the girl who spotted a $500 million fraud in 24 hours. They'll want her. They'll fight for her. And Morgan will hunt her. Richard Goldstein entered then, his face hard as stone. He had aged 10 years in 2 days. But his presence still carried command. That's enough, he growled. You talk about Emma like she's a commodity. She's not. She's a child. My company is alive because of her, and I'll burn it down before I let anyone take her. For the first time, Caldwell's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. His voice sharpened. Do not be foolish, Richard. You're thinking like a sentimental man, not the strategist you once were. The world doesn't care if she's a child. It will use her gift, one way or another, better under my protection than under theirs. Emma's eyes blazed. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the room. You don't understand. Numbers don't just tell me about money. They tell me about people. I saw your pattern too. Mr. Caldwell. The room froze. Emma picked up the reports from the table, flipping through with quick, precise hands. You don't just represent Meridian Ventures. They've been funding shell companies to companies tied to Morgan's old associates. Not to stop them, to buy them. Caldwell's face drained of color. For the first time, he looked at Emma, not with calculation, but with fear. You've been using Morgan as bait, she continued, her child's voice steady as a blade. Letting him run while you build your own network in the shadows. And you wanted me to keep quiet, because I saw it before anyone else. The silence was electric. Catherine's breath caught. Richard's fist clenched at his side. Samantha's hand hovered over her weapon. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, his smile returning but thinner, strained. Extraordinary, he whispered. Absolutely extraordinary. An 8-year-old who sees through the veils that have kept men like me invisible for decades. He stood slowly, picking up Emma's tablet. For a moment, it seemed he might smash it against the table. Instead, he slid it across to her, the glass gliding on polished wood until it stopped at her fingertips. You win this round, Emma, he said softly, but you painted a target on your back. Bigger players are watching now, and they don't laugh. The words sent a chill through the room. FBI agents stormed, and seconds later, Agent Davis at their lead. He looked from Emma to Caldwell to Richard, sensing the tension. Morgan's been located, he announced. Toronto, we move within the bar. Caldwell adjusted his tie, his mask slipping back into place. Good, then my job here is done. He walked past them, his eyes lingering on Emma one last time. Remember this, little girl. Patterns don't just reveal truth, they reveal power. And power always comes for those who can see it. The door closed behind him, leaving the boardroom vibrating with everything unsaid. Catherine pulled Emma into her arms, clutching Liam between them, her voice fierce and trembling. He's wrong. You're not theirs to use. You're mine. Your family. Richard stood at the window, looking down at the lights of the city, his reflection broken in the glass. No, he said quietly, she's more than family now. She's a warning to all of us, that we build towers so high we forgot the ground they stand on. Emma leaned into her mother's shoulder, Liam's tiny fingers wrapping around hers. Her voice was small but steady. Numbers make pictures, Mom. And the picture I see isn't finished yet. No one in that room doubted her, because even in her innocence, Emma had just proven she wasn't only saving companies. She was staring into the heart of power itself, and somewhere, beyond the glass towers of Chicago, the next players were already watching.